Hello and welcome to Joey and Friends. I'm Joey. This is the podcast where I sit and talk to my friends, and I'm here with two of my friends, Kate Perry and Tim Schoen.
Hey, happy to be your friend, Joey.
Happy to be here.
Excited to have you both here. Finally happened. A long time in the making. I think we started trying to schedule this in like May, and now we're here and we're doing it. We're all busy, you know?
Yeah.
Life happens. Okay, I have two options for opening banter.
Okay.
Topic. Okay. One is summer vacations.
Okay.
Okay. The other is the object that I'm holding in my left hand.
That could be anything that would fit under the table.
Let's do a vote. Although there's the danger of us splitting, so it's either going to be unanimous or a hung jury.
Well, I know where I went for summer vacation. I don't know what's in your hand.
Yeah,
I know. I'm curious about what's in his hand.
Now I feel like I need to know.
Yeah.
I just found this in the closet before. It's one of the COVID thermometers.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is it's a visual gag, and we're on a podcast,
is.
so this honestly is not the best topic for
Fond
discussion.
Well, it makes
memories.
noise.
It does. Let me turn it on. Oh yeah, there's the beep. You hear the beep?
Mhm.
What a weird season this was.
What
What's
if
your
we
temperature,
found
Joey?
Was it 6 inches away?
Maybe.
It's like that's like a foot.
87.4. I
we
think I'd be dead.
We discovered earlier because we were going to bring that with us to camp.
Oh, really?
Just in case. And
For real?
It, for first aid. Like if they're
Sure.
feeling feverish, then we see if they have a fever. But
92.1
yeah,
feels
it
healthier.
does not work.
92.1 is
Still not.
really low.
You're at 92.7.
Yeah, that's not real.
We're supposed to be in like the 95 range.
Is this Celsius? Is that how Celsius
98.6.
works?
No, it's definitely Fahrenheit.
Yeah, Celsius would be like 30 degrees.
What a weird season. It was like we were all in. You ever see the movie Contagion?
I think I had to
haven't,
watch
but
it in health.
Pretty good.
I think it might give me flashbacks.
You watched it in health?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because
It's
we
a good
took
movie.
it over the summer. It was not a real class, and it was great.
Yeah.
I don't know anything.
An
It
elective.
was not. It was
It
not
was
a real
not.
class.
No.
Those are the best.
Okay, I'm very excited about this topic,
Mm-hmm.
and I was thinking about this because it's honestly a deeply depressing topic,
Mm-hmm.
and like there were moments of genuine like sadness throughout reading this book. We're having a little book club today. We all read
Yay.
a new book. I think this is like hot off the presses. Is this
Pretty
2024?
much.
Well, I mean, it is this year. It was a new book when we started talking about getting together.
Yeah,
That's true.
Copyright 2024. Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation. What's the tagline? There's a really good tagline.
Do you have the dust jacket?
No, I took it off because you two didn't have yours, and I wanted to.
I
to
hate
match.
dust jackets.
I do too.
They're
They
I was
come
thinking
off.
about
They
this.
slip around and yeah.
I always end up taking it off, but then I don't want to throw it away.
Yeah, mine's just sitting on
So
a
what
shelf.
do you do with
Yeah, mine is
them?
also on a shelf.
When
I
I
thought
end
about
up-
putting it back on when I put it on the shelf, but then
Yes.
I also just like how
It's clean.
I just like the way books look without a dust jacket.
Uh-huh.
But then what if it gets dusty?
That's not
God
to
forbid.
me. I just think it's like pretty.
I, like,
it looks
spilled
nice
something.
in the bookstore, like on display.
It does.
You know?
That's fair. Yeah, I'm gonna put my jacket back on.
Yeah. Keep it safe. Keep it warm.
It got a little something on it a while
Oh,
ago, and
yeah,
I don't want
look.
that to show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Some
Gross.
pasta sauce or something.
Yeah, maybe coffee.
How the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. Jonathan Haidt is a social psychologist, I think is how he identifies.
Yeah.
I read one of his books, The Righteous Mind, a few years ago, which is, I think it's about why people are divided over religion and politics. And the religion caught my eye because I really like hearing non-Christians or people outside the faith talk about religion and even specifically Christianity in like a respectful, thoughtful way. Because I think it's useful to have that kind of outside perspective on just the way things are, because we're inside of our little bubble and we say things a certain way and do things a certain way. And I think just being self-aware and understanding kind of how the world perceives us, and I think we'll talk about it more when we get to chapter 8, which is my favorite chapter, I think is useful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes it gives us a nice barometer on where different pockets of our culture, like how they see the usefulness or value of our movement as a whole. Right, because we can get
Yes.
so locked into our little mini expression of it that we're involved in, especially because you and I still work on staff at the church. Kate, just of 2 days ago, has
No
abandoned
longer.
us.
You could say whatever you want on this podcast.
It's
There's
true.
No risk.
I'm gonna
pursue a
start-
career
I'm
in
gonna start
education.
Swearing.
We get so locked into like our little expressions. Sometimes it's helpful to know too, like, okay, what is our culture's differing thoughts on our religion as a whole,
Yeah.
or our like the group of people that we're a part of as a whole.
Yeah, definitely.
and to even watch the pendulum swing like
Uh-huh.
at different times.
Yeah, for sure. So this guy's really smart, and he basically is writing about something. I think that it was very funny reading this book because my experience was not necessarily revelatory of like shock, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that smartphones and social media are slowly killing us, you know? And I honestly think a lot of people are like kind of aware of that. Like, I think if you ask most high schoolers, they'd be like, yeah, we're on our phones too much. Social media is causing anxiety and depression. Like, we kind of know all these things, but reading this, it was deeply satisfying to read because it's like, oh, that's why, or that's it. Like, he's giving language and words and reasons for what we're experiencing.
Yeah, and demonstratable research, right? Because there's a difference between like gut feeling and to be able to point to research that seems to support a gut feeling.
Yeah.
Definitely. So it was a good read, and it was revealing, and it was even a little bit emotional for me. There was even some moments where I was like, and I want to talk about my journey with this at some point in our conversation, because my specific age is it's a very funny age.
I wanted to ask actually about like for the three of us, like where, because he brings up that like 2010 2011 time frame super regularly. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about between the three of us, like where we were at in our lives at that point, because I think we each interact with that turning point in history that he's mentioning over and over from different directions. And so for me, like 2010 is when I got married, and so like this whole thing that he's describing has all been during my adulthood. I got my first smartphone as an adult. I got my first flip cell phone at the very end of high school. That's about the time that we got broadband internet in our house. And so when he's talking about millennials not having the same relationship with it as Gen Z, I'm like, oh, I can totally see that, because I was there during that point, and then during this whole time period was working with students and watching like them interact with it in different ways. But for you guys, where does 2010, 2011 put you? And now is your chance to make me feel very old. Well,
I'm going to go next because I want to save you for last just because of the ages.
That's fair.
Literally in this book, he says, and this is a direct quote, people born in and after 1996 were different psychologically than those born just a few years earlier. That is my birth year. Like, it was, so that was what made it so weird, is he talks about the Great Rewiring being 2010 to 2015. It is exactly when I was in high school. I started high school in 2010. I graduated 2014. In 2010, I had a flip phone. In 2014, I got my first iPhone. Like, I lived that shift. And so it was just crazy for me, because it really was the start of like the world kind of as it is today. And a lot has been added along the way. And it was really interesting to hear him talk about the different specific additions that contributed, like the front-facing camera, Facebook buying Instagram. Like, there was all these little moments these little markers along the way that contributed to making it worse. But it really was those 5 years. I think you're 5 years younger than me, right? So you're like 2015 to 2019?
Just about, yeah. I was 8 in 2010.
Okay. Yeah. You were a little kid.
Yeah.
So you really have grown up in this world.
Truly,
like,
yeah.
Yeah. We had smartphones. Like, you've grown up in the world of iPhones.
I had an iPod Touch.
Yep.
In... What was that?
Those?
Fourth grade, fifth grade. Everybody had them. They couldn't really text like they could, but not if you didn't have an email. And if you're 10, you don't have an email.
Yeah, no.
So we didn't really text each other on them, but we did. We brought them to school to keep in our backpacks, and after school we would play Cut the Rope or Flappy Bird, or something. Like, it was just for games
Flappy
back
Bird,
then.
Angry Birds.
Yeah, it's what like a Game Boy was for my
Basically.
generation.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we have a little thing that we can play games on.
My first one, though, was the iPod Touch 4, which had a front-facing camera on it. It was the first one with a camera.
Oh.
Yeah, that wasn't just for playing music and playing a game or two.
When did you get Instagram?
Too soon. Wasn't allowed. It was maybe 2012 or 2013.
It was 2012 for me.
Yeah.
Which
it
means
was
you
like
were young.
really soon.
You were a lot younger than I was.
And I had like one follower, and it was my friend Taylor. Like, it was not it was not like I was posting all the time. It was just like, what is this? Everybody's doing this.
I vividly remember the moment, the text where someone was like, download this new app called Instagram. I remember it was Jordan Hawk was her name. Shout out to her. Haven't talked to her in 10 years. But I remember that moment of like being invited into that. And it was a photo editing app. First, like, that was kind of the initial. Like, it wasn't quite. I mean, you could post and all those features were there, but it wasn't. it wasn't social media the way that Facebook was. It was kind of like,
Right.
here's like, you could do cool filters at the time they were cool, and post them and, you know, have a grid and stuff. But it wasn't.
It's sort of like how Visco is now. Where Visco,
yes,
you add
it's exactly
filters,
like
you
that.
edit, but nobody
Yes.
really uses it as social media.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think from 2010 to 2012, Instagram was Visco. It was like
Mhm.
a place to edit your photos, and then you'd post them on Facebook or on Instagram as well.
I think even the interest in Visco was like, oh, what if we went back to
Yeah, totally.
Instagram the way it was?
And Visco's been very intentional about not having social elements to it. Like, it is not a social app. You have a feed that you can post to, but it's not.
There's not really likes,
Which
reposts.
is again like a fascinating like it's not anywhere near as popular, right? Like
It is a tool that serves a purpose.
Yeah, it's
you know.
popular for photo editing, but it's not
Yes.
popular for. Well, it could
Social.
be. It was back in like 2016 during the Visco girl
It
era.
did have
it
it
was.
blipped.
It had a moment.
Yeah, it had a moment.
But it's just like I mean like the social media bells and whistles
Yeah.
drive people to platforms like in a almost like a
Yes.
visceral way,
Totally.
which is something that the book even like kind of
Totally.
touches on significantly.
And it's really been fascinating because I think the assumption was so we had MySpace, and then we had Facebook, and then we had Instagram. And the question was always, what's the next Instagram, right? And I think what we've seen since 2015 is less of like a like linear progression of like, we're all on this app, now we're all on this app, and more generational. It's like Facebook is still a thing. There's plenty of Facebook users to this day. Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I think it's become generational and it's become interest based, right? Because like the film community is on Twitter. Like that's where
Yeah.
like that conversation happens. So I think you can find these different pockets. You know, Reddit is another example. Of like,
Sorry, what's Twitter?
sorry, X. Yeah. For clarification,
that.
I've
It's
been
Twitter.
Everyone, all the podcasts I listen to still call it Twitter, kind of
Yeah.
passive aggressively.
Yeah.
So I just have kind of like been on that.
No, I mean
Because in like
Yeah.
2 years, it'll probably go back to being Twitter.
I still kind of think that, not to get off topic, but I do. That is my like theory, is that it's not going to be X forever.
It's silly
the
goosery. to
three of
call
us
it
giving
X.
our tech predictions would be fascinating to to go back to in a couple years. But
Technology killing us is like I kind of was saying at the beginning, it is not a new opinion. Like I think as soon as like I remember in high school, older people, adults, kind of making fun of teenagers for like all being on their phones and like looking at their phones, right? So it's not. There's always been this just kind of negative suspicion about social media, and I think in some ways, high schoolers, college students are a little bit more like, what's the big deal as far as it goes? But like I also said, I think there's at the same time there is a certain awareness about the problems of it. So I think this is a respectful. And because one of the things he talks about in the introduction is he says some really great things about Gen Z. He sees what he like, or he shares what he sees in Gen Z, what he values in them, what he thinks they're going to be able to do in the world. And so it's a very, I found it hopeful in a way that's just not like, this next generation is, you know, just a mess. Like it wasn't just that. It was honestly very like loving and compassionate and caring about like this generation is suffering deeply from the effects of smartphones and social media and kind of what we've like as a world, as a society, have done to Gen Z, you know, intentionally or unintentionally, which is where it gets really dark.
I even think it's fascinating that this started as a chapter in a book about how social media like influences like politics and how we all interact with each other. And it was going to be like, here's the chapter on Gen Z. And then he's like, or there's a whole book here.
It's long. There's a lot in here.
And so I'm fascinated to see the second half of this idea also, to see, okay, how is this impacting all of us in the discussions that we're having around, I mean, with all of the elections that have happened in the last,
Totally.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't even,
I'm
getting all sad.
Let's not get sad. Let's stay upbeat.
Back to
We never
anxiety and
actually,
depression in Gen
we
Z.
never totally answered your question. We kind of did, but as far as like, I guess we answered like where we were at in 2010.
Yeah.
But I would be curious to hear from both of you your experience with technology in high school and how that affected, I think specifically, your inner self, mental health, your soul, but also like your community and your like social relationships. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm curious from whoever wants to go first. Feel free to think about. I know
You
it's
want to
kind of
reverse the order, Kate?
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
go?
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like it was very much integrated into everybody
Yeah.
by then. I started my freshman year in 2015 or 2016.
Yeah.
and I had an iPhone 6 or something.
Yeah.
I had Instagram. I'd had Instagram for a few years. So did all my friends. We also all had Snapchat. Pretty much nobody had Twitter because it was like really serious. I don't know. Nobody liked to talk about like random stuff on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just very normal to everybody be on these things.
Yeah.
And we all posted all the time. It wasn't as like all the time as it is now.
Yeah.
But it was, we didn't have, well, we had Instagram stories, but it was pretty new and nobody used them. So it was,
sure.
yeah, nothing was as constant as it is now, where like you can upload to your Instagram story every moment of every day if you want to, with everything that you're doing in the day. We didn't do that back then. It was like the less you posted, the more mysterious you were, and so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also was the era of the Finsta.
Oh,
the
sure.
the
I don't
private
feel like we've necessarily
Instagram.
left that era.
No, I don't think we have.
Yeah.
I think you leave that era when you turn like 18 and nobody cares anymore.
It's so funny you bring this up, Kate.
Let's
I
hope
was
so,
literally
you
thinking
know.
about starting a Finsta like 2 weeks ago. I was like, should I have like a
No.
okay.
No, it's silly goose.
Yeah.
It was silly. It was very much like I'm 16, so complicated.
Yeah.
Everything in my brain is worth sharing.
Yeah.
And everyone needs to know what I'm thinking and how serious and smart and mysterious and sad I am.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's the Instagram your mom can't look at. So it's even better.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was a whole culture, like a whole subculture of like private Instagrams where it was very different from what you would post on your main.
Oh, totally.
Then you would have your private. And sometimes people would like have their private Instagram tag in their bio on their main account. I always found that so weird. Like, why would you want?
Still,
Why would you want that? It's a private
it defeats
account.
the point. Yeah.
Yes. So I think mine is still up out there somewhere.
That's
but
crazy.
still private.
That's crazy.
Nobody find it. But it was interesting. It was not fun. Having that access to just scroll and scroll and scroll is not good for anybody, as we have seen. But especially in high school, like I remember picking up my phone every few minutes doing homework, not able to focus on what I was doing.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't picking up my phone, I was then just shifting the tab that I was using on my laptop to do homework to open up a tab on Instagram or whatever else.
One of the significant like just design shifts that Instagram made was going from the linear. Do you remember that it used to be linear? Like
it was so
chronological?
annoying, and it still is.
Yeah, and then they changed it to kind of the more algorithmy, like this is the most interesting post, and it really would keep you on it longer because you're kind of always. You always might see something new, whereas it used to be you'd reload and you're like, oh, I've seen all the posts.
It's disgusting. Like the gamifying of like human desires and like realizing that we like just giving the algorithm knows what you want. And if it just gives you what you want, you're actually less motivated than if it only sometimes gives you what you want.
Yes.
Like, and I can't remember if that was talked about in the book, if there's something else that I've like seen recently outside of that, but like just that. I get almost like a slot machine. Like if you always won some amount of money on a slot machine, you'd be less like interested to pull it.
Yeah.
Except for maybe the monetary value. But
Sure.
if you were like, oh, I'm making $16 an hour at the slot machine, or I could go get a job somewhere else.
Oh,
But-
right. Yeah.
But the option to maybe win it big. And that's what the algorithm feels like sometimes too. Whether it's YouTube Shorts or on Instagram, it's that sense of like, oh, maybe I'll find the next thing. But we all know the algorithm knows what you want. It could just feed it to you
every time.
instantly.
It also knows what makes you really angry.
Yes.
Like when you comment on certain things multiple times, or if you stay on something for too long, it's going to start showing you more of it. And I don't know if this is actually true, but I heard that if you go to like the little 3 dots on the top and you click like not interested or like don't show me this anymore, it takes that into account as this makes this person upset and maybe sprinkle it in every now and then.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like it doesn't actually, unless
crazy.
you say like block this person or like don't show me post by this person, it will take that as like, well, she's not interested, but she took the time
Comes
to
back a little
interact
while
with
later.
Wow.
it still. So
All this
what was
stuff
it about it?
sounds like conspiracy theory until it just
But
is
it's
proven
really,
real.
it's
You
not
know what
even
I mean?
hard. Like it's not even hard for them to do or
No,
illegal.
no.
It's just playing
like,
with
they
your
wouldn't
mind.
do that.
It's not even false advertising. It's not saying don't show me this for the most part. It's
just
just
like,
saying
noted.
I don't like it.
You're just giving them information.
Yes.
And they're like, we'll take that into account. Thank you. All right.
It doesn't say how it's going to use that.
And it's the whole thing is like we interact with these websites as if the website is the product for us.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's our attention is the product for the advertisers.
Ooh.
And like we more and more get kind of treated a little bit like digital cattle. where it's like, okay, as much as we can like get out of you without driving you somewhere else,
Yeah.
we're going to try to straddle that line.
If you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild.
What's funny is you still kind of didn't quite answer my question, which is
sorry.
What? No, it's fine. How did it affect your life? How did social media affect your life out in the real world?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. We took pictures of everything and like chose specific things to post. It was not a photo dump time. So you chose very specifically.
Yes.
It also wasn't, I don't think we had folders on Instagram yet for a lot of it where you could post like 10 pictures. A lot of it, you could only post one at a time.
Yeah.
And maybe you would double
That's
post.
the thing. You can post folders.
Well, it's a folder. You just choose
I've
10
never heard
pictures.
it called folders before.
That's what it's officially called, I think, but
is?
nobody really calls it that because it's been such a thing
I
for
call
such
it
a long
swipe
time.
through. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think that wasn't a feature. So you chose very specifically what things you posted that you
Yes.
wanted everybody to see.
Well, and I was scrolling back through my Instagram recently, and I was noticing. Well, I archived I had like 300 posts, right?
Yeah.
And what I realized is, the things I used to post were things I would now post in my story. Like it was
Yeah.
just me in a car with two guys, and it was just, like not a great photo, but we were just hanging out, And I'm like, that would never be a post today. That would just put that in my story if I'm just
Yeah.
like with somebody and whatever. So that was one of those like shifts that I think added to it and had made you spend longer time on a specific post.
Yeah, and it was also, I don't know that we ever took cyberbullying seriously in high school. I remember that they would give us like presentations on them.
Right.
They were like, if you're being cyberbullied, just turn off your phone. Like they can't believe you turn off your phone, which was the joke, but that's not necessarily true. And I think that the chapter on like relational aggression with girls specifically is great for talking about that. Like it isn't cyberbullying, but it is like blocking somebody on Instagram isn't an attack.
Yeah.
It's more of a defensive mode, but it still is like when that person notices that when they search your name, they can't find it, they know.
Yeah.
And that was the thing too. You'd go on your friend's phone and then you'd search for them. And if they came up there, you knew that they didn't delete Instagram. They just blocked you.
Yeah.
And then it's like, why? What happened? Like still passive aggression, not necessarily cyberbullying, but like the tiny little things there were mean.
Oh, yeah.
And relational aggression.
Yes.
I had something happen where on a Finsta, somebody that I thought I was friends with posted a picture of themselves smiling badly and said, I don't care, Kate Perry smiles like this. And 7 people sent it to me within like 10 minutes.
Wow.
Like had just screenshotted it and sent it to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you guys are friends with her too. You guys probably shouldn't show me that.
Yeah.
But thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, it's like, or you could ask her to take it down.
Yeah,
Or like you could hold
say,
her
"This is
accountable.
mean."
Or yeah.
So, like,
and
there
that's
were-
still a thing with students now is like
Totally.
everyone likes to tell the other person like, oh, this person said this or did this instead of in the moment have that discussion. I mean, recently it's come up even with like in-person interaction where it's like, you guys should just tell them not to say that in that moment. Like you don't need to, the 12 of you go and tell this person like, oh, everyone's talking bad about you and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Like, how about some accountability?
Yeah.
But same thing in those situations online. It's like when you all know each other anyway, come on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the community is so small, especially at my high school, which was the size of a middle school. Like we all knew each other.
Totally.
Yeah, word spread.
Yeah.
But it was not common to see like kill yourself, you stink, and no one likes you on Instagram. Like that was not a thing. It was much more subdued because everybody
Yes,
knew that if it
yes.
was more, it would get screenshotted and like shown to the principal, or like you could get suspended if somebody saw that it was you.
Well, the example you gave is very. There's no like harsh language in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
mean.
It is deeply mean, but the buzzwords aren't there.
Right. Yeah.
And so it could easily, if you're just scrolling, past.
Yeah. And
you
it was
might not-
mostly harmless. It was just like, what made you post this?
No, it's
It's
sad.
embarrassing.
Effects of technology, social media on your social life in like high school and college.
I mean, social media when I was
Not
in high
really.
school was like LiveJournal, which I don't know if you guys know. It
No.
was so like pre MySpace.
Okay.
LiveJournal was a place where you would sign up for an account and you would write your journal or diary page, and other people could read it
Oh. Okay.
and talk
like a
about
blog.
cringy
Oh,
because
wow.
people really would treat it like their,
their
journal.
journal.
Yeah, I
Wow.
think I only posted it to it one time,
That's crazy.
and I don't ever want to look that up.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't still exist, but I'm sure it is floating out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
yeah, during high school, it was very little. Eventually, it was a little bit of MySpace, but even that was something like, people would have their pages. You could look on it. You could rank your friends on MySpace, which was like always a little bit of drama. You could have your top 8 friends or whatever it was. And even the top 8 were ranked like 1 through 8. And so it was always interesting to see like, oh, whose top 8 am I in? Am I on the top 8 of the people I'm putting in mine? And
That's wild.
I went back and looked at mine like I think a year ago, and I was like, I even thought I was friends with these people. Like, why? Like, I don't understand. So that was like a different thing, and you could post like, here's this song that I'm listening to right now, and it was much more like your own website about yourself than it was social media the way that we maybe think about it now, where like with constant interactive stuff. And then even when I jumped on Facebook, like that was a lot of people, like you would post a status about yourself.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it was like your name is, and then a blank for you to fill in. And for a long time, that was what Facebook was like. You could poke people.
Yep.
You could have a little like board where you put up fake digital pins of your interests and stuff. And so it was, even that form of Facebook was more of a curated page about yourself that then you all interacted with. Whereas now so much of it has morphed into comments of things that people are posting and communities of people who like have interactions. And so it was a lot more of it was a way to maybe learn a little bit more about people that you had real life relationships with.
It's very sweet and sincere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the concept for it, or the impetus, is that the right word of it?
Maybe. I don't know.
It was very like cool. Like it was a cool thing.
It was fun. Yeah. I mean, even to demonstrate how like we thought of it so much more removed from real life. There was a girl I asked out who said yes.
Yeah.
Who she got cold feet, decided she didn't want to go out with me for a single date, which was fine. I'm better off now. That's cool. I don't still harbor any resentment.
No.
He's just looking into the middle distance.
Yeah, just out, staring out the window. She sent me a text and asked if I had checked my Facebook yet that day, where she had written like a couple paragraphs like to me in a message, like in a DM. And so it was like this weird, almost like it was like safer to like, I'm going to send this over here instead of in a text or instead of this other way.
Wow.
And so that was like maybe to illustrate like how far removed it was. Whereas now it feels like a lot of these social media messaging platforms, like whether I'm sending you a text or a DM on Instagram or a Facebook message, it's all sort of parallel to each other. Whereas at that point it was still a little more removed.
Totally. Yeah. I can't believe how much, and so this was kind of my big personal revelation with this book, was like, I think I was feeling a little bit above it all as I was reading it. I was like, I don't struggle with, being on my Instagram too much or being too worried about what people think. But it kind of hit me. It hit me as it started to talk about kind of the ages that specifically struggle with this. And I started to realize, oh no, a lot of how I live my life, the choices I make, the things I do, who I'm with, I am thinking about it in the context of not in the context of, but how is this going to play out on social media? How am I going to be able to post about this later? How am I going to be like, but so it's social media affecting the way that I live in a way that I wasn't even totally present to until I started reading this book. And I don't want it to be that way. Like I say that with no pride or enjoyment, I say that with, without any, I'm not excited about that.
Yeah.
And so that, it just kind of was like, oh, I'm guilty of it has a strong hold on me. And I love Instagram. And I actually have for a long time been very open about that. I'm like, I really like posting. I like working on a post. I like, I do posts for Rocky Peak and Revolution now. And it's like one of my favorite things to do is Instagram. But the amount that it affects my life, I'm like, man, I really need to start becoming aware of this.
That's really the main reason that I'm not on Instagram.
Yeah.
Really at all, is because during seasons of my life where I was like, oh, maybe I'll post every once in a while and get into that. I could just feel it dominating the way that I would think about something. Totally. Or I'd post something and then I'd think about what the interactions were going to be. I was like, I just can't have that being what my life is centered around.
Yeah.
And I think something that you and I like share, and that maybe a lot of us share,
Yeah.
is just that sense of like really wanting like approval from people and wanting to base our sense of self around what other people think about us. And it just felt so heightened, like with social media as a tool. I was like, either I'm going to dive into this like 1,000%,
Right.
or I'm going to have to be completely like disconnected.
Yes.
Which is why I didn't know that there are folders on Instagram.
Yeah, it just means you can post 10 pictures.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
Did you know that it's 20 now?
It's 20? No way.
Well, maybe I'll jump back in.
I posted my 3 years of Rocky Peak by Rocky Peak, and I was like, okay, only 10.
Actually, not to brag,
Okay.
I was doing my Thailand post,
Okay.
and I accidentally tapped another photo, and it went to 11, and I was like, whoa. I went to do a Rocky Peak post the other day, and I was like, I can do more now. It was still limited on the Rocky Peak account.
You know what? Those notes thing that you can do,
Uh-huh.
I still don't have that on my phone.
I think they roll out features in waves.
They did, because everybody had it but me. And on the Wildlife Instagram account, we had it. But then on my account, I did not. And then when I open it on my laptop, I have it. But on my phone, I do not.
Have you updated?
Yes.
That's
It's
I think
really
they
odd.
literally roll out features in waves. I don't know why. I don't know technology. I don't know if that's a technological
it's
thing or
silly.
a beta testing thing or like what.
It's silly. I think that's dumb. Give it to everybody.
Yeah. Okay. I have a few things I wanted to talk about specifically, and then I'd love to hear some of your guys' thoughts. One is it talks about in the introduction. Honestly, even just the introduction in chapter 1 of this book are like so good. Like if you can, I'm talking to listeners now, if you could like pick it up and like just read those or borrow a copy, like a lot of the content is even just in the introduction in chapter 1. But it talks about 4 features typical of real world interactions versus online digital world interactions, right? So real world interactions are embodied, right? This is one of those things that I'm talking about where it's like, this is all intuitive and obvious, but nobody has like pointed it out until now why social media is the way it is in comparison.
The embodied thing was a part of the conversation during the pandemic when we were
Sure.
all of a sudden like on screens.
Yes.
And so we would talk about, especially when it came to like ministry, but even just life in general, of like, man, there's something different about connecting with people sitting in the same room versus on a screen.
Yeah. And a lot of these are going to apply to that. So like, yeah, embodied requires being tuned into body language and like more that's there than just when you're on Zoom or when you're on FaceTime or, whatever. Synchronous.
Yep.
Crazy. I
All
mean,
at the same time.
he literally says that, like a video call is theoretically close to synchronous, but when you go online, we'll get to the online version, but yeah, and again, obvious real world interaction things, one-to-one or one to several communications. You're talking with one person or you're talking in like a group, and you'll see in social interactions, if you have a group of 10 people, inevitably you'll kind of have these little like this pod of 3 is talking and this these 2 are talking and these 5 are talking, and then this is so crazy, communities with a high bar for entry and exit.
Yeah.
So deep. Motivates the repairing of relationships. Real world communities, high bar for low entry and exit. Sorry, high bar for entry and exit. Whereas, so all that compared to digital world interactions are disembodied. So you're interacting with people in a digital way, and this in VR is not going to help with this.
No.
It's still it's not
still
embodied.
disembodied,
It might be a closer representation of real world, but it's not. It's not the
Maybe.
same. Maybe. Compared to asynchronous, so it's happening. You're going to see a comment someone left 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago,
Or 4 weeks ago.
or forever ago. One-to-many communications, so you're broadcasting to hundreds of people, thousands even for some, and communities with a low bar for entry and exit. So it's so much easier to just yeet yourself out of something if it's not going well. Whereas community is supposed to be valuable. It's supposed to be a valuable commodity in our lives that we are healthily anxious to lose.
Yeah, that we take seriously.
That we take seriously. That's like worth investing in.
I mean, I think even like as people, we all know it's easier to hold someone else to a standard than to hold ourselves to a standard.
Yeah.
And so even in community with high entry and exit bars, like you end up holding each other to standards higher than you would as an individual.
Totally.
Even in a healthy balance, right? And there's an unhealthy balance for being judgmental to people and not holding yourself to the same standard. But in a community, we're all kind of like lifting each other up. There's a little bit more of that going on than if you can just, as you so eloquently put, yeet yourself out.
Yes. And that's something too, is when you think about like what does a community look like on Instagram? It's like
Yeah.
the followers of a certain account could be
Yes.
a community. But
Yeah.
even then, you're following like a person most of the time. It's not
Yeah.
like a group or an organization. Like if you do, you're not really scrolling on that very much. But
And
when
you're
you follow
treating
that
that person like an interest, even.
yes, like the interest that unites everybody.
Yeah.
And then if they do something wrong, you can just unfollow, or you can
Yes.
hate them now, and there's no repercussions of that other than what you do to that person.
How fun is it to hate people online? Like it just stirs up something weirdly visceral
warm
inside of
fuzzies.
us. Oh.
Yeah, that doesn't happen in real world communities most of the time.
Yeah, the one to a few versus one to many, it was like so resonant because it's like there are so many things I go to post on my story and then don't. Like you would not believe the number of things I'm just like, this isn't worth it. Like, right? Because I'm thinking through, and part of that is feeling the weight and the pressure, I think in a positive way, of being in leadership. And I'm like, you know how many moms and moms of moms follow me? Like, it's just, there's so many people. And so I'll want to post something.
Say moms of moms?
I don't know, grandmas, that is what we call it. Yeah.
Is that what they're called?
Are they in the room behind
Yeah,
us?
they're right next door. I am thinking through all of that, and I think there's a way. So I'm coming at it from more of like a overly, I was going to use wise, but like an overly like concerned place. Whereas that either way, that pressure to think through what everybody is thinking about you is like exhausting. Like it takes so much of your like mental capacity and emotional capacity to think through, if you're posting to 500 people, what all those people are going to think about you.
Oh, we've all had the experience in real life where you're sitting with like 5 people and you're like, should I tell this joke with this group of 5 people?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, they'll all get it. They know where I'm coming from.
They know your heart.
Or like,
Yeah.
you know what? This person, they might think something different about me if I tell this joke.
Yeah.
But then you multiply that by so much further.
Yes.
And you're like, what is safe to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. And that,
Which I mean, we should all be careful, which is good.
Sure.
But
yeah,
the pressure, like you're talking about, is huge.
it's a lot. Any other thoughts on that? Just kind of the like difference between.
Yeah, I remember when Instagram added the business account feature. Nobody used it unless you were actually a business.
Actually, yes.
Until
Just for fun.
everyone found out that you could look at your insights
Oh,
if you had a
yeah,
business
yeah.
account. And it would show you like, you know, the amount of likes, but it would also show you like what time of day everybody liked your picture. Because if you're a business, you want to know
Yeah.
so that you can post at those times and spread and get engagement. But you could see like when everybody was doing that, you could see your demographics, like how many men versus how many women, what are their ages? Did I show up on the explore page or did everybody just find me from their homepage?
Totally.
Did people start following me from this picture? Did people go to my account after looking at this picture to go like stalk me?
Yeah.
Or who bookmarked, like who saved my post and who DM'd it to other
Sent it,
people?
Yeah.
And
that's
I
the number,
remember
that's Emeta's number one
that
metric that they look at.
that
is-
was terrible.
yeah.
I hate that one because I did it.
'cause
I
you
still
don't
have a
know,
business
you're
account.
Like, what are they?
Yeah, like what are they doing? Like I remember one of the first pictures I posted with my boyfriend.
Yeah.
It was sent to like 10 people.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you guys care?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Well, in some.
We were just excited, Kate. Okay? We were just.
You're just like, what a weird couple. Yeah.
No, that is the most important metric to me. Like on Revolution's Instagram, because that also includes story shares.
Yes,
So-
which it didn't back then.
Yeah,
But
so it's
at
a
the
really
beginning.
important metric. Like that's the number one metric that Instagram wants to see to share a post with more people. Is like, are people sending it to us? Like it's a big, or sharing in their story. But yeah, sometimes when you do like a more personal post, and you're like, okay, I know I saw this in like 5 people's stories, but like this was clearly like DM'd to other people, and I'm sure they had something to say about it. You know what I mean?
Like what were you
So
talking about?
It's kind of chilling.
Yeah, that's one of those things where once I started looking at it, I was like, I'm going to look at this on every post I've ever made in my whole life, and I will never stop. Like, I
Yeah.
need to know what people are saying about the
Totally.
thing that I posted.
Totally.
Like,
Well,
why
you
are they
can't see.
sending it to
That's
people?
that's the weirdest part.
Exactly. And then you just make it up in your head, which is
Yeah.
really fun.
Really healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, we all are really good at reading people's minds and
Yeah. Oh,
knowing
yeah.
what they say. About
10 out
us.
of 10.
Everybody
Yeah.
knows that.
Yeah.
Olympics of reading people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other thing I want to hit is my favorite chapter was chapter 8. So I want to get to that at some point, but I would love to just hear general thoughts from you guys on the book in general, which is so hard because it's like there's a lot in this. But
Big
what
boy
stood
book.
out as interesting, fun, insightful, groundbreaking?
As a parent, and someone with kids in public school, I think some of the like suggestions that he has when it comes to government and parenting and school decisions are fascinating to consider.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that he kind of holds them up as like, hey, here are some of the solutions that I think would be helpful.
Yeah.
And I can see even for my kids in their ages and just how much time they spend on a Chromebook in their classroom, which isn't quite a smartphone, but is internet connected.
Sure.
I even sat down with my kid's principal towards the end of the school year last year, because in my son's class, they were getting a bunch of free time on their Chromebooks to log into different types of websites, and there's technically supervision, the teacher can look at everyone's screens.
Yes.
But there's almost 30 kids in the class.
Yeah.
She's not actually
Yeah.
able to monitor what that many kids are doing and
Sure.
teach effectively.
And you have minimal accountability from the student sitting behind you, maybe, but
Right,
it's
yeah.
not.
And
yeah.
it all came about because kids in the class were getting on Spotify and getting accounts. And my son's like, did you know there's a thing on there called porn sounds? And, and he's like, and he makes a face like he was really disturbed.
Sure.
And I was also disturbed.
Yeah.
Which, of course, kids are going to find whatever online
No,
when you
yeah.
give them that kind of freedom. And so the conversation I had with the principal was like, hey, you wouldn't just, when kids were done with their work, send them out to the yard to go play completely unsupervised.
Right.
But we're just sending them out online to go play
Mhm.
basically unsupervised.
Yep.
And it makes sense for there to be a higher degree of supervision, or for the Chromebooks to really just be used as a tool in the classroom.
Totally.
You guys remember, I don't know if when you guys were in school, you ever saw the math compasses with the really sharp needlepoint end on
Yeah.
them? Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't hand a group of
Oh,
You make a
protractor.
circle. No,
Yeah.
that's an angle.
Oh.
This one makes a whole circle.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's pointy on the end, so you can stick it in the
It's
middle.
sharp.
I can picture it.
The real thing is it's sharp.
Yeah,
Right?
okay.
You wouldn't give a whole bunch of fourth graders a tool for that for an assignment, and then
Right.
be like, all right, guys, you guys are done with it.
Okay, bye.
Have fun.
Yep.
Throw them around.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't give a tool out and then just let them use it haphazardly. And I think the same thing should be happening in schools, whether it's the tools that we give them or their use, the use of their phones
Yeah.
and stuff.
That's one of the heartbeats of the book is children are overprotected in the real world and underprotected online.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
pretty deep. It was wild.
Yeah, I do. On that, I disagree with him a little bit in the children shouldn't be as protected in the real world. I
Okay.
think I walked to and from the bus stop and took the Simi Valley public bus to and from school starting in
Huh.
7th grade. Just because
Okay.
my parents were working and I wanted to get home before 5 p.m. So,
Do you feel like that's a normative?
no, it was not
Yeah,
normal. Because
yeah.
also the Simi
how-
Valley
how-
public bus is terrible.
Yeah.
But how was that experience for you?
Yeah.
It was fun. I had a bus crew. My
Yeah.
bestie Megan at the time was also on the bus with me, and she lived we both got off at the same bus stop, but then she went this way and I went this way. So we had
Yeah.
a partner on the bus the whole way,
Totally.
and we both knew where we were supposed to get off. So if somebody fell asleep or wasn't paying attention, someone else would pull the cord.
Yeah.
And then in high school, we had a bus crew with a group
Yeah.
chat that we always
Aw.
are you taking the bus today? Oh no, my mom's taking me. Everybody knew if someone was going to take the
Not gonna
bus.
be there. Yeah.
And it was nice. That was fun.
That's
but
really sweet.
it was really sweet. And
Yeah.
then walking home, I would get off by the Vaughns, and then I would walk about 15 minutes back to my house. But sometimes I would get followed in a car.
Wow.
It was not strange. I would just walk around a
Yeah.
block a couple times, or take a shortcut through the park that they couldn't drive through,
Yeah.
or something else to get away. And it was
Yeah.
not completely uncommon.
Totally.
I always had a phone where I had 911 dialed, or my mom, so that I could just yap and have somebody think, oh, someone knows where she is, so I'm not going to kidnap her.
Yeah,
but
totally.
I think that the idea of, kids can just run around outside, nobody's going to actually sexually abuse them, no one's going to actually kidnap them, was
Yeah.
kind of a sentiment a lot in this book. And I was like, I don't know about that one. Actually, that is kind of a danger. And it's more dangerous online. I think it's more common to have young kids have predators stalk them or
Yeah.
be gross on social media than it is likely to happen in real life.
Yeah.
But I remember my life group co-leader, Monica, she was talking about when her kids were growing up, she would send them outside to play in the street, with the neighbors. and they would all go play unsupervised, but she would work by the window and just watch.
Yeah.
And she would just make sure, like, they couldn't see her, she could see them.
Totally.
So they felt completely unsupervised, but she was there watching just in case a car was going a little too slow past them and being weird, or if somebody got really hurt and they didn't want to tell anybody, or if they went too far away.
Totally.
She could see that they were doing that, or they would come and tell her, and they could walk to the store, but they had to come back, and it was a certain time, like supervised but unsupervised.
Totally.
Like not
and I think
rules and all that, but
I think that is
safety.
Some of what he's advocating for, along with just looking at the like statistical research to say that when Gen X was running around totally unsupervised, those types of crimes were actually much more prevalent in our society than they are now. Like those things happen a whole lot less. And it would be interesting to know, like, do they just happen a whole lot less because no one's playing outside? Or is that like rate just like
right?
really
If
down?
we were to go back to that, would there be an increase?
But,
probably.
but even then, at that time when it was increased, there was less of a parental concern of like, this is actually going to happen to my kids.
Yeah.
And my grandmother told a story about playing outside and almost getting kidnapped and being put into a sack and like escaping. And so like things like that have like happened, right? These aren't things that never happen to people. But statistically, and like talking to parents in my generation, like people are afraid that if I let my kid be in the front yard in my quiet neighborhood, it's done. It's like a sure thing. Like, people talk about it like it's a sure thing, like your kid's gonna get kidnapped if you're not watching them at every moment. Yeah. And parents have this feeling on their shoulders, if I don't take every precautionary step, I'm neglectful. Right. Without recognizing that we're then launching kids into adulthood who have been coddled their whole life, and they don't now have the ability to get on the bus and protect themselves and have the phone with 911 dialed and feel confident. Like you're probably much more confident to walk around a semi-sketched neighborhood knowing that like you can figure things out than someone who has actually never done that.
Yeah.
Because I think the message isn't that the world is safe, but that we want to teach kids to be able to be responsible for their own safety at appropriate levels.
And be resilient.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we can have a balance. As a parent, how are you like moving towards safety online, and are you do you intentionally try to give your kids risky play, as he calls it in the book?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's always been a dialogue between Silvana, my wife, and I. Yeah. Because she grew up in a really safe household where like things were probably overprotective. Yeah. She would say overprotective. Okay. I probably would agree. Her mom, by contrast, was given a knife to keep under her pillow. So there's generational things going on there. That would be a fun story to get into if we had infinite time. Yeah. So we've gone back and forth on the risky play thing and how much is appropriate. Yeah. But we try as much as we can to get them to like play unsupervised and to limit screen time. And then we also see, especially for our oldest son, like he loves video games, and there are times when that hour of screen time is done, he just putzes around the house with like, oh, what is there to do? There's nothing to do. And sometimes you want to solve even that boredom thing for them, but there are times where like after a stretch of boredom, he'll find something really interesting on his own to do. Totally. And he's developed an interest in art and drawing and things like that I probably wouldn't have introduced him to, and Silvana probably wouldn't have introduced him to, because he got bored and just started like putzing around and figuring things out and like move towards that. Or even like this last summer, one of our goals has been to equip them to walk home from school, which is only like a couple blocks from us. Yeah. And so we went and we dropped them off at school one day during the summer, our 10-year-old and our 8-year-old, and had them walk the 2 blocks home on their own, just so that they could get comfortable doing that. Yeah. So that maybe at some point during the school year for a few different days, they could do that on their own. Yeah. So we'll see how that develops. It is always, even doing that though, and I'm the parent who prefers the risky play stuff. Yeah. Even in doing that, I was like, oh, this is gonna be stretching for me. Like I have to like take a deep breath, because you raise these kids from the time that they're like totally helpless, and it's like, no, he's 10. Yeah. He's not helpless. No. He's not completely self-sufficient, but we need to move in that direction. So I don't know if that answers your question totally.
No, it does. I think the answer is just that it's hard. I mean, my dad sent a text in our family group chat. I guess there was a kidnapping in Simi yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, at the library.
An attempted kidnapping.
Oh, it didn't.
Well, they caught the guy.
They did catch the guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
praise
that
God.
text came through too.
I didn't
Yep.
hear that. My dad didn't send us the end of the story. Gosh dang it.
Don't worry.
But honestly, is a little microcosm of what happens online.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally.
It's like, hey, here's this problem, and then you never hear
Guess
about the
what?
resolution.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
So yeah, you hear that as a parent, and like, holy crap, like that's terrifying, you know. And it's I think there's a like risk reward conversation about like, yeah, what are we losing by keeping kids so sheltered, and so how much can we give, or, how much can we allow to create that value of risky play that he talks about in the book, but also have them still be safe. And then I would imagine there's also just a reliance on God element of just like, you have to, at some point you just have to trust God, like with your kids. And I'm not a parent yet, so that's like so like way easier said than done, for me. But yeah, it's crazy. Any overall thoughts on the book? Any like any big standout things from you?
I have my takeaways.
Okay, great.
But yeah, chapter 8 was definitely one of my favorites, especially learning that he was an atheist.
Yeah.
I think it's common, especially like in college classes that I'm in. They'll say things like, "Oh, it's a high psychological need to have some kind of spiritual attachment." And everybody who says this is an atheist. It's like, how can you say that and have nothing? Like,
I know.
and he says too, like,
He literally talks
divinity.
about the hole for God. Is that the name of that section?
Yeah, it's
God-sized hole?
yes, the God-shaped hole is on page 216.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere. He
Yeah.
says even like in Happiness Hypothesis, I wrote a chapter titled Divinity with or Without God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm blinking so much because like how do you reconcile that? Like, how are you an atheist and say everyone needs spirituality? Like, agnostic, I can understand. Like, if you just don't know, like, sure, worship a question mark, who cares? But if you're gonna be like, there is nothing and everything that there is right in front of your face and there's nothing else.
Yeah.
What's your spirituality? Like, what do you invest in? Just like wishful thinking? Like, what is that?
In his defense, I think he breaks it down. Like what he means by spirituality. It's like
It's still
transcending
kind of-
the self, it's embodiment, it's
But it's still kind of vague. It's like, well, then where does that come from? Which I guess he's probably not thinking about, but
And so this is one of the main things I actually want to talk about and this is what I meant earlier when I said I enjoy hearing people outside religion and spirituality talk about it, because talking about the fact that like you can go to a concert or a sporting event and have a spiritual experience, and where endorphins are being released and you're having the sense of community. To me, that actually is useful.
yeah.
Because to me, it doesn't negate, taking the mystery out of it doesn't negate the reality of it. It actually strengthens it. Because
Yeah,
it's like,
it's like human
this is
connection
clearly a
and-
thing that is
yeah.
built into our DNA, that we're wired for, that we need, and that's good. And for me, the comma and is God designed us that way.
Yeah.
And like, and he gave us these opportunities to connect in this way. I talk about this. Any camp we're at that I have the opportunity, if I'm ever talking about the idea of like a camp high, right? I often am like, hey, yeah, you can go to a concert and you can sing with songs with people that you know and dance, and there's crazy lights and the music's really loud, and all these things that we're providing for you here to connect with God are also available for you in LA every night if you want to go to a concert. What makes this special?
Yeah.
You're connecting with your creator. And so I find it useful to talk about like shared sacredness, which, so chapter 8 is just all these, he talks about different spiritual practices that you can, so sorry, I guess I kind of cut you off. Was anything else?
No, like I think it's all good things to analyze. I just always think it's interesting to have somebody equate them all with leaving God out of it a lot of the time. Like quoting Jesus, but as like a wise teacher rather than as like a spiritual figure who is a deity. Like,
and I don't mean to say that's not weird.
Yeah, it's always a little odd reading a psychologist talk about Jesus, like just so analytically and leaving out any kind of divinity or spiritual leadership or any of that, just because it's so not what I'm used to. But I think that the comments that he made, like in page 209, where he talks about how the Bible specifically, and then Buddhism and Taoism on how to experience enlightenment, you have to think about other things than yourself. And to experience connection with other people or to experience the love of God, we think of others before ourselves. We connect with them. We empathize with them. We take their burdens. And social media says to do the complete opposite, to just think about yourself, be materialistic, judge immediately, and more harshly than you would judge yourself, take everything at face value and do not think about nuance. Like all of that is social media as compared to pretty much any religion or psychology or philosophy that you would have that would inspire human connection.
He literally talks about the Hebrew word kadosh for holiness, being set apart or separated. I'm like, man, it's so good. It's literally what we're like, one that we're called to be as Christians, right? Is set apart. In the Old Testament, that was like consecrated, right? It was like the nation of Israel set apart, right? And we're still called to that today. But talking about it kind of in the context of like experiences, because it wasn't just, people that was set apart. There was like time that was set apart. There were objects, there were places, the tabernacle, like all these things were like separated and holy. Yeah. And I think we're still called to like step into those today, to step into like sacred, to like have a recognition, because we have it intuitively of he uses the word degrading, right? Experience like things that are degrading, or I don't know if there's another word that profane. Yeah. Which is a very biblical word. It's so crazy. Things that are profane versus things that are holy. I think we have an intuitive sense as humans of those things, and we desire to have experiences that are sacred. And things that are profane, even for non-believers, being on your phone for 7-8 hours a day. It is that divinity line that he talks about. It's like it's dragging you down into that, and so I just thought that was wild. Yeah, really good.
That's a fascinating chapter. I think it is interesting to listen to people who are coming from an atheist perspective, acknowledge these things about how human beings are wired. Yes. And then usually the answer is like, for them, they're like, well, and this is probably like a part of, it was beneficial evolutionary at some point in our history for us to evolve to value these things over other things. And so that is like an interesting place where they kind of like put the pin. And I think some of that just comes down to, there's a difference between recognizing that there's a benefit to spirituality versus really pursuing the different religions to understand what makes them different and set apart, and then being willing to submit yourself to one of them is a very different spot. Like you can appreciate something versus like coming under it is a totally different choice. And I think for many people, a part of that journey is to begin to appreciate it, is to begin to see like, oh, maybe there is fruit on this tree. Maybe it's worth understanding what this tree is about. Whereas other people will be content to live their lives in the shade of the tree and never really partake in the actual like things that. And I think even if you look at the history of our nation, there were a lot of people who would have taken the label of being a Christian who weren't really and didn't have a vibrant relationship with God. Sure. They appreciated the fruit of Christian values. They appreciated the community involved in churches, the networking opportunities, all the different like social shade that it offered, which is why I think when the churches started to crumble in the Western world and in the U.S., it like happened really quickly because there were a lot of people for whom their Christian identity was more of an appreciation of what was positive. But it is interesting to see the shifts from like the 2010s, where there was a new atheist movement, where everyone who was an atheist was kind of vehemently against religion, to now you have even those same people. You have like a Richard Dawkins saying positive things about Christianity, because we have seen over the last like decade and a half the difference in what happens when we really fully strip out biblical values and religious values out of a society. Yeah. And we're like, oh, maybe we don't end up as like well off, or you have someone like Richard Dawkins comparing Christian values to other religious values that are seeping into cultures and being like, oh, maybe I liked these more than I liked these, even if I'm not sure that there is a God that exists. Totally. So it's interesting to watch the pendulum swing, but also for us to identify as people who are believers, like, okay, there still is a difference between appreciating the fruit and like being attached to like the roots of Christianity and having a relationship with Jesus, where you recognize like the grace that had to be offered to you because you couldn't make up for it on your own, and what Jesus has done.
Totally.
I do think it's a fascinating question to ask, because he doesn't get into it really in the book. I think he mentions at the very end that one of his Substack articles might get into it, but like, what steps can churches take towards that, right? Like, especially with us working with youth, like at the table, we represent like middle school through young adults, through like 25-year-olds. Like, what steps can be taken across the lines as a church to help a generation that is locked in on a digital system that's preying on some of their base needs, that's really pushing them towards their more profane desires than their divine desires. Like, what kinds of things can we implement that help people set up different rhythms and help people make choices for themselves? Because I think a big thing for students in high school ministry is helping them make choices for themselves, separate from the choices that their parents are making, right? There are things that churches can do to help parents set up well to put in boundaries, but how do we help people who, like, now we're trying to teach them to put their own boundaries into place? Yeah. And so what do you guys think it looks like for churches to take into account the things the book is talking about?
I think it has to be, I think churches learning to talk about it in a nuanced way is really important. Like, and it's not just throwing out the baby in the bathwater, like, of technology and social media, and it just like, get off of it. It's bad. It's all bad, right? It's talking about it. It's having a nuanced understanding of what is Instagram used for? How is it different culturally than TikTok is versus Snapchat? What are all these different apps used for? How can you be intentional with the time that you're spending on each of these apps? What would it look like? What's the why behind maybe deleting Snapchat or picking one of these apps to delete or putting up like, like limitations? I really think church leaders have to actually understand what they're talking about in these things. Not maybe not fully or holistically, but you don't have to become like an expert, but like, I think it creates buy-in and trust and like, for lack of a better term, like street cred, like with the students to understand like, oh, you understand my world. Like you have an understanding of the specific nuances of these things and can speak to them directly rather than just kind of we just need to, it's like, it's all killing us. And again, like I said at the beginning, it's what I appreciated about this book is it's like, here's the exact things.
Yeah. The book is a great tool for understanding that because it takes so much of the research and puts it in one place. Right.
Yes,
like now,
totally.
if you're a leader in the church and you want to understand the impact that it's having on different people, like you can grab a resource and understand that instead of having to research and see a bunch of different opinions
or get addicted to a social media platform so you can empathize.
Yeah. Like coming from a place of weakness myself.
And then practically is something that we've talked about doing at Revolution is a phone case, like doing a phone check-in, like at the door.
I think giving people space away from their phone. At regular intervals helps remind people of what else is available for them. They're like high school camp. We did that. And then we highlighted it just a couple times of like, hey, you had a whole week without your phone. What did that feel like? Or some of you smuggled your phone in and you've had it the whole time. What does that say about like you couldn't put that away for a few days? You felt like you had to have it.
Yeah.
Like then just helping people see what's right in front of them.
Totally.
And probably casting a vision too of like, what's available, the awe that's available in our relationship with God, the difference between spending time and doing a devotional study on the Bible app that takes me 5 minutes and then I leave a comment because I'm doing it with 10 of my friends and like that's my only experience in the Word. Like that's not a bad tool to have. Like it's kind of a fun tool to have at our disposal and to live in the time that we do. But what's the difference between like just, okay, I put my phone on the other side of the room or just outside the door for 20 minutes for me to just spend time alone with God?
Yeah.
How does that affect me emotionally? Where are my thoughts being pulled? How am I able to incorporate that in my relationship with God? And using those as examples when we're talking with students, because that's the world that they live in. Like it's hard for me as a 37-year-old to put my phone aside for like to spend time with God and to hear it like buzzing on. And I'm like, oh no, like what's work have to say or who's texting me or who needs to get it? Like, and I can only imagine as a teenager where your impulse control is even lower. Like, just how hard it is to have that constant reminder of like, hey, pay attention to me.
Really quick, the holy profane thing, I feel like applies to like in a small way to like reading the Bible on your like phone versus like a physical Bible. Like there's like a sense of like specialness when you're like holding a physical Bible, and it's not, we talk about it not being like not magic or not like more spiritual. But in some ways, I think this book would say that like it is kind of more spiritual in the way that he uses that word. Do you know what I mean?
It's more of a sacred act.
It's more of a sacred act.
I think it's interesting to hypothesize about that.
Yeah.
It's also fascinating if you go back in history when the printing press became a thing, how many people felt like it was profane to give people access to the Bible on their own in a book that they could read.
And that was the entire Reformation.
And look how much that shook up the world, right?
Totally.
Like, and if you were a traditionalist at that point, you'd be like, look, I told you this was going to be a problem. And now look, everybody, like the church is splitting apart and there's all these little mini churches running around. And
I love the idea of a podcast in like 1593 where they're just like, man, all these people have their own Bibles.
Where they're comparing Gutenberg to Elon Musk. And like, look at this guy just making information available to everybody. And
oh, it's funny.
Kate?
Yeah, with middle schoolers, running the Instagram account is very interesting because most kids don't have an Instagram. And so
Thank
we're
God.
really posting for parents, who also don't necessarily know how to use Instagram.
Yeah,
a lot of the followers are like, Jacob's mom is the Instagram handle. And then there's no profile picture, no bio, no followers, no posts. And they're only following to see pictures of their kid at camp
To see Jason.
and announcements. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And so
Maybe
like
that's her
posting,
Finsta. She doesn't want you
yeah,
to
it's her
know.
Finsta. It's so interesting to like post for them. Like they don't care if I post 800 times in a day because if their kid is in 2 of those pictures, they're so happy.
Yeah.
So posting for teens as well, like going through like what's this culture? Like what do we want to encourage social media use by posting all the time and addressing it to the students? No. We don't want to like have these like cool kind of graphics like Revolution does because they don't have a story to repost it to. Like and they don't use it that way and we don't really want them to start using it that way in 7th grade.
Totally.
So
I think that's good.
Yeah, where we want them to
And your account's private, right? The wildlife account?
No, we actually just shifted it to public maybe a few months ago.
Huh.
I don't remember. I think it was just like we got requests all day, every day, and they were always parents, and we'd get DMs that I didn't see. But it was
relatable.
Oh my gosh!
Like,
but
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's been 4 weeks. Yes, camp is this week. But it's interesting to try to like. It's okay. I'm not here anymore.
So I'm not in charge of wildlife. So
you are in charge of high school, and that might have happened for high school too.
Yeah, Instagram hides it. To be fair, but it's interesting to try to like. Yes, I've been there, like, especially during COVID. Like, I definitely was addicted to TikTok. It was, like, just stuck in my brain all the time. I would just scroll for hours. There was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And then my online classes were like, you can cheat if you want to. So I would just scroll during lectures. Like, it didn't matter. There were no repercussions for just spending my day scrolling, other than my own brain chemistry being completely ruined. So talking to the students at the time who were a lot of the time in the very same spot of, well, my mom put an hour of screen time on my iPad, but if I just delete the app and re-download it, or if I just like I know the password but she doesn't know I know the password, or something like that, they're so sneaky to get that fix because they are also addicted even if they only spend an hour a day. And it was terrible. I was like watching them do this and I was like, oh, I need to delete TikTok. Like this is bad. Watching them do the same thing as me, often getting the same things on their For You page that are just as damaging or even like harmless. But it's like, this is my 9-year-old kid who died of cancer. It's like, well, that's not like, you know, hurting you or making you think differently, but it's making you sad. Like, you don't need to see that when you're scrolling. You don't need to like suddenly have this deep sadness and dread about this 9-year-old you just found out about moments ago. Like, that's not good for you either. Yeah. So it was like watching them not only feel all of the same feelings that I had, but also watching them experience, like in the girl chapter specifically, because I had middle school girls, like watching videos, and then there's this girl who's so perfect, and whether she's edited or whether she's just like really pretty and like even though she's their age, she looks like she's 20. Like all of those things, watching them do that and compare themselves and then be so sad or like hate themselves or talk about how they hate their body or they hate XYZ about themselves or about other people. and like compare themselves to that standard is so sad.
Totally.
And watching them like have real life repercussions where like eating disorders or like hurting themselves or comparing their friends or ranking their friends in person instead of MySpace. Like all of those things happened. And it was so sad to watch. Like, who taught you this? Like, yes, it's in my head because I'm an adult and I've seen it on social media, but I can detach from that.
Yes.
This is your life. Like you see this on TikTok and you're like, oh, this is it. This is how older kids do it. And so this is how I do it.
I think what's interesting too is like so much of that is a part of what it is to be a teenager over the last like 40, 50 years, to have some level of that. And then just social media takes that from, this is my experience in my community where I'm trying to figure out my social standing with these people who I'm around. And do I fit into this group? Do I fit into that group? Who are the people I want to be like? Who are the people I'm critical of? Who are the people who are critical of me? And it just ramps it way up.
Yeah.
And you see it with guys and you see it with girls and you see like the people that they're comparing themselves to. And it's just like the different examples of people to follow and to model your life after like radically change, which he talks about in the book too, of like having different, like it used to be, you look at people with social standing in your community and those are the ones you want to be like.
Yeah.
And now that social standing is someone like, here's this 20-year-old guy who is trying to be a professional bodybuilder, is on loads of steroids, and everyone thinks he has a great personality, and I want to be like him. And the person I'm describing seems like he really does have a great personality. I don't think he's out to hurt anybody, but we have students that we know who have been like pulled into that kind of world and who have like thought about and considered using those kinds of like substances to help their physical performance in the gym or with a sport. And it's prevalent because of that. Yeah. And that's with guys who the book talks about as being like less influenced by that kind of thing than like young women.
Less, but not.
Yeah,
for sure.
I sort of wish he'd talked a little more or maybe studied more about influencers. I went to camp and I was in the cabin with the 6th grade girls, and there's that whole trend recently of 9 or 10-year-old girls running to Sephora to get skincare products to help them stop aging, like, and getting all these products they don't need. It's like it's a newer thing. There's like 3 or 4 specific brands that they just love and are super expensive and buy so that they can do skincare, and often like, get ready with me, and it's like a 10-year-old, and it's fun to watch because they're adorable, but it's not fun to think about because it's like, why is this kid dragging their parents to Sephora to buy them $40 retinoids, which they don't need? Like all of these things, like watching in the cabin, these girls going, okay guys, I'm going to do my skincare now. And they're pulling out these super expensive products that they super duper don't need. And then they're asking me what I do for skincare. They're asking me what I do for makeup and hair care. And they have all these things. It's like, you just watched adults do this. And now that you see it more because your algorithm likes that you like this, you're going to keep seeing it, and it's going to feel like everybody's doing this, and you have to too, to be normal like them.
And it's aging kids faster than is appropriate.
It is. It's sad too. It's like, you don't need this. Like, this is not for you. It never has been. And if this was 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't even have imagined this would be for you. You wouldn't have wanted this if you hadn't seen it.
Or at 9 or 10, you'd be using your mom's stuff and practicing being a young woman in your family environment, instead of posting about it and having it be this like performative action.
Yeah, it's sad. And so I think, to answer your question, like, as middle school ministry, like, what can we do? It's hard because a lot of them don't have phones either. That 6th to 8th grade time is like when they start to get a phone. So if we're talking to only the 6th graders, most of the time they don't have a phone to begin with, or they have like the family iPad that they have very rarely. If we're talking to 8th graders, it's like, hey, you need to start thinking about your social media use, because now you have social media, you have a phone, you have very, not unlimited, but less restricted access to it. So here, let's start talking about it. So those are 2 very different conversations of like, hey, here's how to prepare well for getting your first phone, to you have your phone, you've had Instagram for years. Let's talk about how you use it well. Like, having a rule to govern all of that is hard. I think that like the phone in a lockable pouch thing that he talks about all the time is a great idea. I remember having the life group that I was with for 3 years of girls who hated when we brought out the phone bowl where they had to put their phones in there. Even though we didn't have a lot of cell phone usage during life group, we had like 1 or 2 that would text. But it was not common. they just wanted to have their phone on them for safety, for my mom parked somewhere and she wants me to know where she parked, or it's about carpooling. I swear, like it's always something. They just need to have it on them to feel safe. It's like a safety blanket. Yeah. Where if it's gone, they're thinking about how it's gone and oh my gosh, she was texting me and what happened. Even if they open their phone and they have no notifications, it's still scary. So I think like having the phone away from them is good. Social sense too
of like I'm gonna miss out on something that's happening.
And I like in middle school, I feel like it happens every few years or every generation of 6th to 8th graders. The social mediaification of the YouVersion Bible app, where they're sharing their prayers and they're commenting on each other's prayers and they're doing like the little devotionals together and then commenting on it. Like it becomes social media.
I don't.
It's so funny.
I'm so critical of that.
It's so
like,
weird.
I think that the YouVersion app was a huge leap forward in providing like Bible access to people who are brand new to the faith, who are just exploring things. But then to make it into a social media platform, light
streaks,
it just
like streaks,
and I can see the like desire to be helpful and like, oh, this will help small groups, this will help this will help that.
Those all feel like excuses.
But it just,
though.
I mean,
I would push back a teeny bit. The plans feature where you can kind of comment what you're learning. I like that.
I mean, you can do that in person much more effective. I've done those plans with people,
I'm
and
doing
like
one now with someone I'm sure you did it with once.
Yeah. And I don't know if I've ever seen someone's comment and been like, oh, that's really insightful. And not that it can't happen, but I feel like it was a race for me of like, okay, if I do it first, then my comment will be there for everyone to see. And I'm just like thinking about things that I don't want to be thinking about in my time in the Word. Like,
the shred.
Oh, that's
I
valid.
remember when Colin was doing the shred. That's my boyfriend. When he was
Looks
doing
the camera, that was awesome.
When he was doing the shred, which was like you read the whole Bible in a month or something.
Yeah.
There were all these guys that did it all together. And he was like, so and so already dropped out. It's only been 2 weeks. Or this person's 4 days behind. Cringe. Like he would like it was a joke, but it was still like he was looking at who was behind. Yeah. He was looking at who had never even started it, who was like 2 months late but finished it today. Yay!
That's funny.
Like it was something he compared
for a month of doing that. Like
funny,
where it's like, man, we're trying to climb this hill together. We're gonna read the whole Bible in a month,
and
like
and roast each other in the process.
And I remember like those guys were like, I've read 2 hours of the Bible today, and like
I was
finally
very
I'm caught
openly
up or
like I would never. That sounds awful.
It was a real grind.
Reading the Bible.
Sounds fascinating, and I think you get a lot out of that. And there's that like spurring one another on thing that can happen, and I love that Colin's sarcasm was a big part of the cultural
really
experience
funny.
for everybody.
It was really fun.
But I think if that's like your experience every month,
yes,
that
and
changes it.
If you're a middle schooler or high schooler who's doing not necessarily reading the Bible in a month, but doing like a be anxious for nothing plan on like how to not be anxious at school or something, and you're with your 10 best friends and you're all reading or not reading and everybody can see that you're doing it, or you can just open the thing, scroll to the bottom, hit next, and it looks like you did it. Then it becomes social media, it becomes performative, it becomes something that you comment on to either sound really smart or just to do it for the day so nobody pokes you. Like when that's your experience, just doing plans and doing devotionals all the time and that's all you have, it becomes a little yuck.
Yes. Well, okay, a question occurred to me as far as high school goes, because you mentioned how middle school, you're really not posting, for your Instagram, you're not posting content to encourage students to basically have their own social media. Like you're not feeding into that, right?
Yeah.
We really are. Or like I currently am with our Instagram strategy.
Well, yeah, that
I am
makes
like
sense.
posting reels that are going to get shared. I'm really engineering content like around that. Tim, do you think, and this question has crossed my mind, there is more value in being in students' world and connecting with them in the world that they're already in, basically no matter what? Or would there be more value in like not having social media as an example of kind of the harmful and negative aspects of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think a part of it comes down to the line of, and the book is careful too to not call it a like basic evil. Mm-hmm. It's not something that is like wrong. It's something to be used moderately. And even in the book, his suggestion is that like 16 be this like the social media age that people like hop on and start engaging with it. And so I think there is an aspect of meeting people where they're at. I think it would be different if on our services on the weekend, we're pointing people to like, hey, make sure that you don't miss out on the things that we're doing on our social media. Where now it becomes a, like, if you really want to engage with, like, we're driving you to, like, 14, 15-year-old who maybe is, like, on a little bit of a young side to be on it, even though most of them are going to be. Like, if we're encouraging them to ramp up their social media use versus making it an accessible thing for them of, like, hey, if you want to invite your friends to this or like share something or to feel like you know what's going on in the ministry, here's something that we're doing to keep you up to date.
Totally.
I think there's a balance to be had there. And I think it then is kept in balance with some of the things that we talk about, where when we talk about having self-control, which is a really like a very biblical value, that social media is a part of that conversation. Or when we talk about anger, or when we talk about comparing yourself to others, and those things that come up just naturally as a part of exploring God's word and his design for our life and the character we're supposed to have, using social media as a regular example of, the same way we would use passing period and you're having lunch in the quad, or you're at work and your boss at McDonald's does X, Y, and Z, like also talking about social media as like a regular part of their life that interacts with these different character things. Then we start equipping people to be people of character in the world that they're in, to make wise decisions, instead of maybe just saying like, hey, here are the 3 things you shouldn't do, or here are these limits that you should put into place. I think it's the same thing when we talk about boundaries for dating. Like, we give examples for people of what good boundaries look like, but more importantly, we also talk about the heart and character behind that, so that people make decisions that are the best. Because we can't think through every possible permutation, but we can help people have the character that's going to help them to make the right decisions in those moments.
That's good. The wisdom is critical. To wrap up, and I think we can get out of here by 10:30, he gives 4 foundational reforms that he proposes for what we can do in our world to make this better. And I think these are interesting, and I think I'm on board. And I'm curious, especially for you, Tim, as a parent, what you think of these. 4 foundational reforms: no smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, I really like that, and more unsupervised play and childhood independence. We kind of have touched on these, so this shouldn't, we can just keep it brief. But do you think these are good, bad, helpful? What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. I think I've already had conversations with a couple of other parents who have kids our age, and we've discussed, at least preemptively at this point, like my oldest is 10, and so we're at the point where he's like, when can I get like an iPhone? But mostly because he wants to play games on it. Where we talked about like, hey, like I think your first phone's probably going to be like, it's going to be like a flip phone or something where you can contact us and you can contact some people, but the full access and life dominating power of a smartphone won't be something that you have. And so I love that one. I think the no smartphones in high school, as someone who's worked with high school students for a long time and has seen it go from like, don't ever have your phone out in class or we'll take it away, to students just like sitting in class watching movies on YouTube and their teachers just being like fine with it. I think it's wild the way that that's shifted. And I think that parents need to let schools have a harder like line on that. I think schools backed off because too many parents got upset because the schools were taking phones away. And I think that there needs to be a better partnership there where everyone is willing to say like, I'm not going to let my teenager throw a fit and have that impact the environment that they're in. Like, we need to better shape that environment. No social media before 16 makes a ton of sense based on the arguments in the book, and far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. I think he makes a great case for that in the book. I like those 4 buckets.
I think it'd be great. Any thoughts, Kate?
Yeah, I agree with all of them as well. I think no smartphones before high school, going back to what we can do. I know that when I had my life group of girls, both times there was a group chat. And if it wasn't a group chat on iMessage, because some kids don't have iPhones, then it was a group chat on like WhatsApp or GroupMe or something else. And if those kids don't have smartphones, they're not in the loop. They're missing out on all that, which is sad.
Totally.
But I don't think that it's sad enough to give your kid a smartphone for that reason.
Totally.
I don't
and something probably for us in youth ministry to think through. Like, okay, if we think this is a better choice for parents, how do we then also support that and not just be like, yeah, you guys shouldn't have phones. All right, everyone get in the group chat and
I think that is really important. And then the no social media before 16, absolutely. I think they, again, will miss out on a lot. Will probably complain and say, oh, I missed out on this thing I didn't see, or someone tagged or somebody took a picture of me and put it on there, but I didn't see it.
Yeah.
And it's all, that's nothing.
It's
like
so
you're waiting
fleeting.
a year, 2
It's
years.
fine.
Yeah. And then
it is, just to be sympathetic, it is hard when you're in it.
it
hard
is,
when
and
you're
I
waiting.
remember, but it's dumb.
Yeah.
But phone-free schools, definitely, as somebody
so
who's
in.
approaching teaching,
Yeah.
the mentor teacher that I have has like little pockets in a thing that you put your phone in.
Yeah.
And when I first
great.
heard that, I was like, well, but no,
I've seen clips.
It's silly goose.
I've seen clips posted of like school hallways in like 2009. And it's like
Everybody's
talking to each other.
Even at CSUN, nobody speaks.
No,
I will get
know.
to class
I
20,
walked
30
around
minutes
CSUN
early.
recently, and I had
Oh,
the same.
it's so sad.
It looked like a bunch of zombies.
It's really sad.
And
Nobody
people-
talks.
They looked like they were afraid of each other.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like,
they
it
are.
was
'Cause
really
we are.
They
sad.
literally are.
We are.
It's so sad.
Yeah, as somebody there, I am afraid of them. Yeah.
Sure,
I don't want to
yeah.
talk to them. They're scary. I'm not going to see them in 2 months, so might as well just not even try.
Yeah.
Or we have our Discord group chat, but it's just for, hey, does anybody have the homework from this week? Or like, I'm confused. What do
Right.
we read for tomorrow?
Right.
Like, it's not friendship. It's not communication in a way that's building connection. It's just like nothing.
Yeah.
It's kind of gross and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know that we could ever enforce phone-free universities, but
No.
it's schools in general, like it should be a phone-free zone.
Yeah.
Even like lunchtime, recess time, like that time should be sacred still. You're at school, you don't need to be checking Instagram.
And important stuff is happening developmentally during
Yes.
those times.
Yeah. Your brain
think
is
we're-
building synapses that you're going to use for the rest of your life. Like you need to have that be uninterrupted time.
Yeah. Crazy. This is a really good book. Everyone should read it. Every parent should read it, I think, in
Mhm.
particular. If you have kids going into this age group, like, get your hands on this, please.
Educators too.
Yeah.
Church leaders.
Church leaders. It's good. We got to be aware. We got to face it head on.
Mhm.
Love you guys. Thank you guys for being here. This
Happy
was
to.
fun.
Thanks, Joey.